Hello and welcome to Climate Check. My name is Mwiikisa, your host. Now today we focus our attention on Zambia's energy sector, both the urban and the rural areas of this country. Zambia is currently dealing with an energy crisis as a result of an El Nino-induced drought that has ravaged the country. The last time Zambia experienced such a major drought was in 1992. Remember the time for the yellow maize? That was the time we had a major drought. And this is another major one. And unfortunately, the population has grown unlike before. And so the demand for electricity has doubled from that time. And so today we'll be looking at alternative sources of energies and also what you and I should do in this time. Join me on the other side. Welcome back to Climate Check. Let's now cast a spotlight to the rural communities of this country regarding the energy sector. I'm joined in studio by Mr. Linus Chanda, who is the CEO of the Rural Electrification Authority. So thank you so much for making time.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
All right. Help us understand the mandates of the Rural Electrification Authority and how different you are from ZESCO.
Thank you very much, Mary. The Rural Electrification Authority was formed by an act of Parliament way back in 2003 with the sole mandate of taking electricity infrastructure in the rural areas. This obviously arose from the fact that access to electricity in the rural areas was very, very low. At the time, I think it was lower than 3%. And ZESCO, who was doing that function at the time, was sort of compromised because in one sense, the utility needed to make money. In another sense, it needed to perform this social function. So that's how the REA came into being. Mm-hmm. And the mandate, as I mentioned, is to take electricity infrastructure in the rural areas. The Act does spell out what we are supposed to do, how we are financed, and how we organize ourselves in performing this work that we do.
Okay.
In relation to ZESCO, as I mentioned, we are an authority formed by an act of Parliament, so we're a grant-aided institution. So within the laws, there is a provision of 3% electricity levy that every electricity consumer pays, and that is channeled to REA in order to finance the electrification of rural areas. ZESCO, on the other hand, is a business. So they are supposed to sell their electricity to the users and make a return. On the other hand, we perform the social function of government.
So far, how many people have benefited from your work, or how many households?
If I align my figures to, for example, the last 5 years, when we've been implementing different programs, some of them supported by the development partners.
Yes.
We have made connections of over 90,000, and these are actually connected to ZESCO.
Okay.
And we've established, as we speak, close to 15 mini grids where we are supplying over 2,000 different households in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is interesting. Now, as a country, we are dealing with an energy crisis as a result of the drought that has affected several sectors. You spoke about foods, the agriculture sector, and many other sectors. And coming to the energy sector, we know that many households, especially in urban communities, are affected by the electricity deficiency. Mm-hmm. As an organization, do you fall into the category of those that are affected, or this doesn't bother you at all?
Certainly, Mary, climate change and impacts of climate change affect everyone. We are equally affected. First of all, climate change will certainly speak to our master plan. Mm-hmm. In our plans, we've got certain sites where we've identified that we can build mini hydros that can supply electricity to selected households. So with climate change, we find that the water supply on those hydros are going to get affected.
Yes.
So we may not necessarily do our plans in such a manner. Secondly, we also get impacted even from the solar end, because as you get changes in the weather patterns, it also impacts on how you receive that sunlight that you need for you to run your solar systems.
Yes.
Again, that becomes an issue that we have to deal with. But even the ones, the rural areas that we connect to the ZESCO system, that is where the greatest impact is felt. Because as we connect more customers, that's more consumption. And on the other hand, ZESCO doesn't have electricity to give to such people.
The Zambian government signed an MOU with the Rockefeller Foundation to establish, are you calling them electricity grids or mini grids? Mini grids in various rural parts of the country. How is this MOU panning out?
So, thank you once again for that question. The agreement that the government signed with the Rockefeller Foundation is supposed to result into some seed money that should result in the creation of over 1,000 mini grids across the country. The idea of mini grids in part comes from the fact that, as I mentioned, running networks, ZESCO networks across the country to certain communities may not necessarily be profitable. But on the other hand, those communities that are in such far-flung areas also need electricity. So we have to supply them using the mini grids. So when we commenced doing the work with a consultant who's been working with us, that is SE4O, we did what is called a geospatial survey.
Yes.
In other words, what we did was to scan the whole country and try and see where communities are concentrated, where businesses are sitting, where schools are, and all these different infrastructure that are out there in the rural area. And from there, then we started creating mini grids, trying to work out how many houses should be in one mini grid that would result into a profitable business. Because ultimately, as you heard the Republican president mention, ultimately his desire and government's desire is that these mini grids must be operated by Zambians.
Yes.
But they have to be profitable.
Yes.
So we've gone around trying to create these communities or blocks of communities that are going to form mini grids. But also we've realized that because most parts of the country is not lit, the consumption, even when we create these mini grids, is still low.
How much conversations are you having around investing into solar energy?
Speaking as RIA, we try to design our mini grids using solar wherever possible, and where it is not feasible, we try to combine two technologies. It's possible for you to combine hydro and solar, so that when there is water, you generate power using hydro. When there is no water, there's sunlight, you generate power using sunlight. But beyond that, ourselves as RIA, we've noticed that where we've implemented solar systems, especially in schools, we've left out one void, and this really does impact negatively on the climate, because the cooking is not addressed. And as you know, cooking using solar can be expensive. So what we've done, especially starting into 2023, into this year, we've installed biogas digesters in about, we did 20 last year, and we're doing another 10 this year, selected boarding schools, so that then these schools can cook using biogas, and they will have electricity coming from solar panels. And we see this element of biogas as a potential business that can actually go into communities, and people can actually harvest that gas and sell it to different households for their use. On a bigger scale, obviously, you know what ZESCO is doing. I think that they are trying to put as many solar systems as possible to try and match up to the water that we've lost in the large reservoirs. But even as they do that, among the things that they have to deal with is how do they position themselves to make sure that base load, which is required to drive industry, is available. And I think all this information is in the public media on what the utility is trying to do in that area.
Let's now take you to Kanakantapa of Chongwe district, where we talk to Mr. and Mrs. Mwiikisa, who are smallholder farmers there. They are practicing climate-smart agriculture, and they talk to me about how the drought has affected their crop yield this year, but also some of their coping measures that they've put in place to ensure that their agricultural practices still thrive even in the midst of a drought. Talk about the realities of climate adaptation. Join us on the other side. On Climate Check this week, we visit Mwiikisa and his wife, Nyuma Nyirongo, smallholder farmers of Kanakantapa area of Chongwe district. The Mwiikilas are a young, vibrant couple grounded in horticultural production. We are met by a refreshing greenery of their maize crop. At a time when most farmers in Zambia are grappling with a major drought, a green and well-watered crop is a fulfilling sight.
So here the watering system that we are using is drip. This is the most efficient way, and also you conserve water. There isn't much of water wastage that happens here. There are no standard drips, so it depends with what you are planting. So these drips, you can only plant, let's say, tomatoes, maize, and other things.
Mr. Mwila's wife, Nyuma, is an agroecologist. She enjoys being self-employed at their farm due to her passion for agriculture.
Mostly on the organic part. The one who spearheads the organic part of this farm. Yes, and I do mostly everything. I water, time to make beds, we do beds together, time to plant, we plant together, time to fertilize the crops, we fertilize together. Farming is all about passion. It's about you saying, I want to do this because I love this, not I want to do this because of the money that will come out or because of what people are going to say. No, they're doing well, they're doing this and that. It's all about passion and hard work.
During a guided tour of the farm, Mr. Mwila talks about the Healthy Foods Africa, a project supported by HIVOS Southern Africa, aimed at empowering smallholder farmers with the right tools for sustainable and resilient agricultural system.
We learned a lot of things. One of them is how to really try by all means to cut on the usage of synthetic fertilizers and chemicals. You just use them when the need arises so that your crops don't. But when you don't really see a high attack, you don't really need to go in. And also paying attention to the pre-harvest interval. Because it was a study that was done, it was actually discovered that almost 80% of the produce, the vegetables and horticultural produce that is consumed in Lusaka comes from the Chongwe area of Funza. And they discovered that most of it has got residues, chemical residues, so meaning there's no proper handling of the chemicals and also just good farming practices. So when the project came in, we went through a series of trainings and workshops on how best to use chemicals, or how you can bypass certain chemicals and just use the natural ways of.
Mr. Mwila has since called on government to help smallholder farmers acquire credit from financial institutions as they prepare for the next farming season. The Ministry of Agriculture has assured smallholder farmers of all the necessary support.
Basically, we've got this facility called the Sustainable Agriculture Financing Facility, which is meant to help small but viable farmers so that they can access the affordable loans or credits from the bank. This is an arrangement that the Ministry of Agriculture established with the various banks. So far, there are about 9 banks that have come on board, and we are trying our level best that all these small but viable farmers are able to access these facilities so that they can invest in agricultural production, so that they can be able to acquire the inputs, they can acquire the mechanization services, they are able to get irrigation facilities so that they can supplement their crops irrigation in case of some short rain season.
Kanakantapa is composed of mainly smallholder farmers whose produce is consumed by the population in the capital city, Lusaka. Mwiikisa for Climate Check. I'm now joined in studio by Mr. Susiku Nasinda, Chief Climate Finance Officer, NSN Energy Consulting, and we talk about the energy crisis the country is experiencing as a result of the drought that we are currently dealing with. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thanks for hosting me today.
Okay. Now, let's first understand what the country has been dealing with. I know the energy crisis, the drought, the food insecurity, all these things are linked to an El Nino-induced drought, major drought that we're dealing with. It's a very difficult time to be a leader at this time in the country?
Thank you so much. Balancing developmental goals and aspirations in a time of multiple crises is very challenging. As you may be aware, if you look at the last 4 years where the entire world has been and where Zambia currently is, we're coming from a time when the world was hit with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
So what we are seeing today happening to the health, to the agriculture as well as energy sector is exactly what we saw happening in the health sector. It revealed several gaps in terms of preparedness of the country to be able to deal with such kind of crisis of this magnitude, and also revealed the difficulties in terms of preparedness as well as the financial and human resource capacity to be able to adapt. So if you look at COVID, we realized that our health infrastructure, for example, was inadequate, that we did not have enough manpower in terms of health personnel, doctors, nurses, clinical staff. And then we also realized that we did not have sufficient resources, financial resources, to be able to buy critical medicines such as vaccines for COVID-19. Now, before we could recover from that, there were other compounding issues, such as the global energy crisis, which has been occasioned by the geopolitical tension between Russia and Ukraine. And then further on, Zambia has been grappling with debt for a long time. So shifting monies from debt servicing, shifting monies from provision of healthcare to education. And now before we even stabilize and recover from that, you find that the country has been hit by an energy crisis. It has been hit by drought. So balancing developmental goals and targets in times of multiple crises is a big issue. It gives headache to government leaders, to policymakers, and also makes it difficult for ordinary citizens like you and me. But what's important is for the governments to come up with policy measures that are able to support citizens to recover, and also at household and individual level to be able to come up with ways of adapting. In fact, as we go into the future, because of the increasing population, because of the increasing demand on energy, vis-a-vis the increase in copper production as we go towards 3 million metric tons, you'll find that the demand on energy will be very high. Where we are now and where we are going, I'm foreseeing a situation where the price of solar products will continue to come down. So we are at that point where the demand is outstripping the supply. So there are very few solar suppliers, and then customers like yourself and myself who want to install a 5 kVA inverter with solar panels and the batteries, we are looking to invest. So what that does is that it pushes the price up. And as this market becomes attractive, because then people who probably deal in football jerseys or deal in cars or deal in clothes, they'll see that there's an opportunity to sell solar products.
So everybody
they'll go and order.
Yeah.
Once they order those things and bring them to Zambia, we will see that after a couple of months, maybe 6 months, and then 1 year, and then beyond that, solar products will begin to go down.
Okay.
So the tax aspect, I think fiscal policy is working extremely well. They've given good direction by zero rating. What we need to do as consumers of those products at household level, at business level, is to be smart. Don't rush into buying those products. I know there's that age to be able to make a solution right now, but compare the prices, how they get.
What do you recommend to government as a way out of this situation? Because I think we are all pointing fingers. We're not offering solutions.
Well, government is doing a lot in terms of reforms in the energy sector in totality. They are working hard to reform the petroleum sector, working hard to reform the electricity sector. So in petroleum, you've seen that we are now importing, for example, finished products, diesel from Tanzania to here. And then on the electricity sector, we have the net metering policy. We also have an open market access for the transmission lines. what we need to do as individuals is to rethink energy, because electricity is not the only energy. If at household level you use electricity for cooking, for water heating, and for lighting, it's now time to rethink. Because when you are faced with a crisis, for example, Mary, if you go to the hospital and the doctor says you've got diabetes, you've got high blood pressure, they'll tell you for you to live long, you need to change your lifestyle. Start exercising, eat a lot of vegetables, stop eating oily stuff, stop eating a lot of greasy stuff. So you make adjustments. Maybe they'll tell you instead of breakfast meal, now you'll be eating sorghum or millet or roller meal. So even at household level, at business level, we need to start rethinking energy. What are some of the bad habits that we've carried on from the past that we can start to shed off? So there's need to adapt. For cooking, I highly recommend that households look at alternatives. Stop thinking about cooking as electricity, but think about LPG gas, think about solar geysers for heating water. Those are viable solutions. The initial cost is a little bit high, but the long-term maintenance costs are extremely low. And that's where government policy can come in. For example, on LPG gas, government needs to look at standardizing the price per kg for the gas, and also remove bottlenecks on restrictions of where you can buy and exchange your gas cylinder. Because right now, if you go to one supplier, let's say a filling station, they'll tell you the price per kg is so much, maybe 45 or 50. So there are so many variations, but for petrol, if you go to Kasama or Chipata or Mongo, it's the same price.
And lastly, what policies do you recommend should be able to help us in the long term solve the crisis that we're dealing with, even off hydro energy at national level?
That's a very, very important question, Mary. There's need for Zambia to have honest conversations with itself. The crisis that we are in is not something to be proud of. We have regressed as a country. It has revealed the gaps that have been there for a long time, but what the crisis has done is to amplify them. So when we have honest conversations, the policymakers, the energy utility company, the regulator, these three are key in solving this issue. The regulator, the ARB, the power utility, which is ZESCO, and then the Ministry of Energy, sit down and have honest conversations. For example, I was just reviewing the National Energy Policy, which was enacted in 2019. You will see that the targets, for example, for renewable energy are not very clear. The country just says we have identified solar as one of the areas where we could diversify. But what are the targets? For example, by 2026, by 2030, how much solar do we want to have in the country? And what proportion of the total energy mix do we want it to have? Those are the things that we need to have. So have a mix of solar. I know solar is not very dependable, especially for large industrial requirements like mining, but it can deal with issues like lighting, issues like household requirements. For example, what I would love to see is that the whole of Lusaka, for example, goes solar at household level. So ZESCO comes up with a plan on how to finance the installation of solar at household level. And then the police also needs to come in terms of national security, because you know that solar panels are now being stolen. They are hot cake. People are losing solar panels, people are losing generators. So how do we enhance national security? How do we prevent people from stealing solar panels and selling them elsewhere? Are there mechanisms, safety and security mechanisms
that can be put in place?
Which can be put in place to be able to lock these things?
We've come to the end of Climate Check for this week. Do make a date with me next time on this channel, and of course at the same time. Thank you so much for your time. Remember, it's time to adapt to the new normal. Think beyond ZESCO electricity. It's time to switch to the alternative energies, and also let's just check the way we live our lives now. It's time to be strict. We can no longer continue being wasteful. This has been Climate Check. Goodbye.